Yo, what's up guys? It's Happy Snail. Today I'm going to be rating Ian Somerhalder, who actually surprisingly scores pretty bad on his front profile. As you can see, he gets a 4.65 out of 10 harmony score for his front and a 9 out of 10 for his side, which is very, very impressive. Then again, harmony is only mathematical. FaceIQ Labs will soon have features that incorporate your dimorphism, body fat, and your miscellaneous features to create an overall score. But focusing on his harmony solely right now, overall, he's a 6.15 out of 10 mathematically. His proportions and ratios dictate that. But regardless of this fairly poor frontal harmony score, considering the way he looks, I mean, look at him, he looks pretty good. His dimorphism and his miscellaneous features change that completely. And I'm going to show you exactly what I mean by that. So let's get into the front profile. So first thing we see with Ian Somerhalder is the deviation of his ipsilateral alar angle, an angle measured from your alar base to your lateral canthus. The deviation of that and between his jaw frontal angle, this angle right over here. And typically you want these angles to be pretty much the same for a harmonious front profile. But as you can see, they deviate about 17.73 degrees for Ian Somerhalder here, which is outside of the ideal range of 0 to 2.5 degrees of deviation. As you can see, it's unideal. So yeah, this harmonious mid-face and jaw alignment. Next is going to be his top third. It's not actually that apparent somehow. I don't know what it is about this guy. Like, a lot of these flaws just like, they don't really glare as much as they would on others. But his upper third is extremely elongated. It's 38% of his entire face, which means that basically his upper third is 40% of his face. That's pretty long. I mean, it's 2% off. 2% is a very big difference in this case, but still, 38% is very tall. So yeah, long top third and 38.44%. Next is going to be his middle third, which is also another flaw. If you were to take some of his upper third and give it to his middle third, it would be a lot better. And then take some of that and also give it to his lower third. Maybe make this 36, 33, 33. That would be much better, I'd say. Next is going to be his jaw frontal angle. We already saw it doesn't align with his ipsilateral alar angle, but the jaw frontal angle itself is unideal. It's too obtuse. Honestly, this is a fairly dimorphic trait, I'd say. It doesn't look too bad on Ian Somerhalder. It's not crazy outside of the ideal, but I'd say it is a pretty big flaw in my opinion. I think it would benefit him to have a slightly less wide and flat jaw. We'll get into the width later. Next is going to be his lateral canthal tilt. Ian Somerhalder is, I mean, okay, I didn't take it properly clearly here. Clearly fucked that up, but regardless. Ian Somerhalder has what I would like to call a true neutral, because his canthal tilt basically appears to be neutral. I mean, whenever I try to measure the angle, it's flat or maybe just 0.5 to 1 degree positive. So that's pretty much a neutral tilt. There is no real neutral, and most people who you think are negative are actually slightly positive with just bad hooding or bad under eyelid support is what I've noticed. So yeah. Next is going to be his total facial width height ratio. Regardless of Ian Somerhalder's obtuse jaw frontal angle that makes him have a broader face look, his face is still 1.45 times longer than it is wide, which is fairly elongated. I'd say anywhere from 1.3 to 1.4 is acceptable, as you see 1.33 to 1.38. But his is 1.45, which is quite elongated, and I'd say this is mainly due to his forehead height. So that's why it's not as glaring. If this were to be due to his mid-face or his lower third, it would be a lot more visible, I feel, because you cannot cover that simply with hair. But yeah, next is going to be his eye separation ratio. This one is also not too glaring. I'd say it's fairly dimorphic, actually, and it suits him pretty well. It's his eye separation ratio of 43%, which means that his eyes are 43% the width of his face, or his pupillary distance is 43% the width of his bizygomatic distance, which is outside of the ideal range. It just indicates that he has closer set eyes. Bit of a cyclops, but not too bad. Next is going to be his bigonial width. So Ian Somerhalder's jaw, or his gonians, are 96% the width of his cheekbones, or his bizygomatic width, which is outside the ideal range and on the higher end, of course. And even though this is unideal, again, this is a dimorphic trait, but it is a flaw. So yeah, too wide of a jaw, but I'd say it's fairly dimorphic in my opinion. Next is going to be his mid-face ratio. His mid-face ratio is slightly elongated, even though he has that shorter middle third. His eyes being closer set makes this line the blue line right here, be 0.9 times longer than the height of his midface. So his pupils, his pupillary distance is 0.9 times the length of the height of his midface, which makes a longer midface ratio slightly, as you can see, slightly long. Next is going to be his chin to philtrum ratio. Typically you want your chin to be 2 to 2.5 times longer than your philtrum. But his chin is approximately 1.87 times longer than his philtrum, which is outside of the ideal range. It indicates a slightly too long philtrum. I'd say too long philtrum in this case because, you know, his chin isn't that big. Next is going to be his eye aspect ratio. As you can see, it's very, very good. This is slightly too compact. I'd say his eyes are too compact slightly. As you can see, he's squinting. So, I don't know. I mean, I could just mark that down and make it a 10. But then again, this guy's literally always squinting, so I'll just keep that as is. Next to me, intercanthal and nasal width ratio. I usually don't really go over this ratio because these are just some extra things to really make sure that we're fully capturing the nose. But yeah, so as you can see, like, his nose width isn't too bad. It's just slightly too wide compared to his intercanthal distance. But this is also because his eyes are rather close set, I'd say. Next is going to be his neck width. His neck width isn't really too big of a deal, I'd say. It's just 1.2% off of the ideal. And also, I think his neck is probably going to be, you know, competing with his jaw for quite a while there. So I don't think this is a flaw, really. Not really a big deal. Ear protrusion angle, his ears are fine. Lower third is great. His lower third is 34.1%. Perfect. One eye apart test, as I said just now. If he had a bit wider set eyes, possibly, just a little bit, it would benefit him a lot. Just if his eyes were physically wider, not his pupils, not just his canthi. If his eyes were overall just physically spread apart, it would benefit this guy. As well as with his ipsilateral alar angle, it would make it more obtuse and deviate less. But obviously that's not possible with any surgery. And then his mouth to nose ratio, this is ideal. And this is another reason that the intercanthal compared to nose width ratio is good, because over here his nose appears to be, you know, ideal compared to his mouth. But when you compare it to his canthi, it immediately becomes slightly too wide, which isn't addressed in this ratio. So yeah, but as you can see, his mouth and nose harmonize pretty well. Next thing is facial width height ratio. So this is just measuring the compactness of your mid region overall, and it's dividing the width of your cheekbones by the height of your mid face. And you typically want to be from 1.9 to 2, and his is 1.93, which indicates a very dominant compact midsection of your face. And usually when this is any lower, like let's say 1.7 to 1.8, you're gonna have a much longer mid face, and this is usually caused by higher set eyebrows, longer philtrum, longer mid face, etc. Next is going to be ipsilateral alar angle. Even though it deviates from the jaw frontal angle, it on its own is ideal. And actually, you know what? If his eyes were physically wider apart, as I said earlier, he would benefit from a higher ipsilateral alar angle. So yeah, that is true. Next is going to be lower lip to upper lip ratio. His lower lip is 1.46 times longer than his upper lip. This is very good. I mean, it's on the lower end of the ideal. You could kind of tell maybe a little bit, but it's not a flaw in my opinion. Eyebrow low setedness, very good. He has very low set eyebrows, perfectly in ideal range. I'd say it's a very strong trait of his. His eye aspect ratio again. Eyebrow tilt, roughly an average of like 11 degrees, I'd say 10.3, yeah. So yeah, that's perfectly in the ideal range, very, very good. Bitemporal width, really good. Cheekbone height. So his cheekbones are 83, let's just say, his cheekbones are 84% the height of his mid-face, which means that they are high set. You want it to be from 81 to 100% the height of your mid-face, just around your eyes to be high set. Not really care about that, don't really care about that, don't really care about that. These are all irrelevant, pretty basic metrics. So yeah, that's his front profile. Let's get into his side arming now. Alright, so now for his side. So for Mr. Ian Somerhalder's side, this is the facial depth to height ratio. So this is basically measuring how forward grown you are. It's a line from the tragus to the subnasal, and then from the mentolabial to the nasion. And basically you're dividing this line by this line, and the higher the result is, the more forward grown you are, basically. I'll just put it like that. And as you can see, his is 0.3 out of the ideal, 0.3 above. So Ian Somerhalder's face has too much depth. He appears to be too forward grown, which you'd think isn't really a flaw audibly when you hear it, but it is. He would benefit from possibly a, I'd say less forward grown face, as I just said, or possibly from this part being shorter. But then again, I'd say probably less forward growth because his mandible is a bit long. So next for his nasofrontal angle, this is basically measuring the acuteness of this area where your nasion is, basically. And as you can see, his is very acute due to his extremely strong protrusive brow ridge. It's just under the ideal range by about 4.5 degrees, which I wouldn't say is a huge flaw, and this is just another dimorphic trait of his. So next is going to be the lower lip birthstone line. So as you can see, Ian Somerhalder's lips protrude about 4 millimeters too much. You typically want it to be about 3 to 1 millimeters behind this line, but as you can see, it protrudes too much. And now for his gonial angle, which is one of the most important ratios on the side profile. It's one of the most weighted ones. He has a gonial angle about 111 degrees, and as you can see, his jaw is on the flatter end, so this does make sense. It does correlate. This is another dimorphic trait, I would say, even though it's unideal. Next is going to be his hold-away H-line. I would say this is pretty much ideal. I mean, it just protrudes about 0.7 millimeters, as you can see. I mean, you just want it, yeah. You want it to be behind there with 0 to 1 millimeters, so not too big of a flaw, but could be better. Next is going to be his lower lip S-line position. So typically you want your lips to be about 0.1 millimeters behind this line, but as you can see, his move out about 0.6 ahead. Not a flaw either, I would say. So next is recession relative to the Frankfurt plane. This is just the basic measurement to tell whether you're recessed. It's a line going through the nasion. And as you can see, his chin meets this line just barely, actually, which is kind of surprising. Alright, so next is going to be nasofacial angle. So this is basically just measuring how protruded outward your nose is, basically, compared to your side profile. Like if it goes how much like this. And as you can see, Ian Somerhalder scores pretty good here. The angle could just be a bit more obtuse, which would mean that his nose tilts outward a bit more. Perhaps from a stronger nose bridge, this could be a result of. Yeah, so Ian Somerhalder pretty much passes most of everything else. Recession relative to the Frankfurt plane. Yeah, I mean, he basically passes this. He's forward grown. Nasal tip angle. Yeah, pass. Brow ridge inclination angle. Dude, I mean, look at the guy's brow ridge. Holy shit, pass. Nasolabial angle. You can tell what this is measuring. Pass. Facial convexity of the glabella. Like how facial flatness, basically, is measuring how flat your side profile is. This is on the flatter end, but I'd say it's still pretty good. Facial convexity of the nasion. This is in the perfect range. This looks really good, actually. Total facial convexity. This is also in the really good range, I'd say. It looks really, really good. It's just, like, I mean, overall, Ian Somerhalder's, like, side profile convexity is really good. His side profile is neither too flat, too concave, too convex. In neither. It's perfect. Everything is good for his side, in my opinion. Nasal projection is great. Nasal tight ratio is good. Upper lip eline position. He passes basically every single lip assessment. The ones that he fails on barely. And then his mandibular plane angle. Even though he has a pretty flat gonal angle, I think his mandibular plane angle does accommodate for that just a little bit. Ramus to mandible ratio, really, really good. His ramus is very strong. Gonian to mouth line, also really good. His gonian just sits right below his mouth. And his orbital vector is also positive. This thing right here, positive. And also his nose tip rotation angle is very, very good. So yeah, overall, Ian Somerhalder's harmony is not that bad at all, in my opinion. People will look at his front and be like, oh my god, you got a 4.65 out of 10 on the front. But then boom, he gets a 9 out of 10 on the side. So it's like, does that really matter harmony-wise? It kind of does, in my opinion, actually. But still, we'll get into that. Because I think that his dimorphism, his features, and his angularity saves him a lot. Let's get into the final rating. Okay, so now for Ian Somerhalder's final scoring. So his harmony, when you average out both scores, is a 6.15 out of 10, which you'd probably consider above average or even average in some regions. But then again, his angularity, which is reflective of his, visible mandible, decent contouring, I'd give him a 9 out of 10 for angularity. He could have a bit more like, I guess, aggressive hollows, you could say, in some photos, but then again, his angularity is near perfect in most images that I've seen. So he gets a 9 out of 10 for angularity. And then his dimorphism, which is basically how masculine you are. For men, it's how masculine you are. If we're talking dimorphism for a woman, it's how feminine she is, but in this case, how masculine. Ian Somerhalder's face is pretty much as masculine as it gets. I mean, look at it. He has thick, low-set brows. His eyes are extremely compact. He has a slightly longer mid-face ratio. He has a good facial width-to-height ratio. He has a long total face shape. He has a overly wide lower third, a square chin. I mean, his facial depth is very high. He has a very strong ramus. This guy is pretty much just textbook dimorphism. I mean, look, he has close-set eyes, larger nose. It's just, man, everything. And look at that brow ridge, too, in the nasofrontal angle. There's really not many feminine things about this guy. So, yeah, his dimorphism is nearly perfect. It's a 9.75 out of 10. And then his features, which are basically his miscellaneous traits, like the quality of his skin, the contrast on his face, his brow density, his lash density, lip shape, nose shape, everything that's the quality of his features is a 9 out of 10. When you follow a logarithmic scale and you weight out all of these things, you get a total score of an 8.25 out of 10, which, you could just consider it a Chad, not low Chad, not mid Chad, not high Chad. I don't really know. Anything above an 8, we're dealing with a Chad here. So yeah, as you expected, Ian Somerhalder is a Chad, and if you do want to get your own rating or you want to analyze somebody else on your own, use FaceIQ Labs and use code HappySnell for 20% off. I'll leave the code in the comments. So yeah, thank you for watching.
Mama sell her baby boy, and I can never be Joe. The Joe T-Rex, my packet of 4 for 4. Mama sell her baby boy, and I can never be Joe.